Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker, I take a short call to support this piece of legislation in the third reading of the Student Loan Amendment Bill number 2. Mr. Speaker, it provides an opportunity to respond to the member who has just resumed his seat, who's just presented the House with what could only be described as a relatively incoherent diatribe, even for him, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, he has alleged... They don't like it, Mr. Speaker. They don't like it. They can give it, but they can't take it, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, he spent most of his speech abusing...
Point of order. It's a point of order.
This member would like to return to his normal seat in this House.
No, look, that's not a point of order.
Speaking to the point of order, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Probably don't need to explain to the public that giving a speech is not the same as an interjection, and therefore that was not a valid point of order, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the member has alleged that New Zealand spends more per capita. That New Zealand spends more per capita on tertiary education than Australia does. That is, I'm assured by quick research from my staff, incorrect both in absolute dollar terms and as a percentage of GDP. Clearly he was being defensive against the perception that the government's measures today, sir, are a funding cut. And the irony, sir, is that he need not have been so defensive, because this really only trims $7.5 million over 5 years, sir. And really the big lesson of this bill is that it does virtually nothing at all. It does no harm. The measures are measures we can support, but in the face of a $2,670 million student debt, it tidies up about $1 million a year. So, Mr. Bennett, I'd say you needn't worry, and probably shouldn't have resorted to that last attack on the Green Party, which was to accuse them of promising young people free tertiary education. That will surely drive them into the arms of National in droves. Political genius from the member for Hamilton.
It usually is.
However, he was trumped by the elephant in the room, the previous National Speaker, Mr. Hayes, who gave a stunning example of the generation gap, really, the intergenerational inequity to which this bill really refers. He said, and it was a piece of sterling wisdom acquired over a lifetime of experience around the world, quote, "Money doesn't come out on trees, it comes out of workers' pockets." Now, this is clearly what National thinks, some latter-day Robin Hood in reverse. They will take the money from the poor and give it to the rich, like they did in the tax switch. They will take the money from the young and give it to the old, like Mr. Hayes or the Honourable Peter Dunn. And the problem with it, sir, is that it begs the obvious question. How did the money get into the workers' pockets in the first place? Is it a kind of fungus that just grows there? Or might it be, sir, that people earn it, that they might earn it hour by hour through wages or salary, perhaps unit by unit through a retirement home development? I don't know. But it's certainly not always a living wage, and that's part of the problem. But when you learn, sir, not you, but when the generic young person learns, they tend later to earn. We learn, then we can earn, and therefore we invest in tertiary education, we don't just spend on it. But enough, sir, about the government's A-team. Let's go back to the bill. What the bill does do, sir, is two small things. It's a typical bill from the Minister for small things. It broadens the definition of income to include trusts, companies and superannuation funds. That's obviously sensible to get a real picture on net income. It provides information sharing between customs and IRD, sir, so that people who are overdue, grossly overdue, on their student loan repayments when they're overseas can be more effectively traced, sir. And although there are civil liberties issues at the margin, we believe that measure is warranted. But this bill, sir, is most interesting to the public for what it does not do and does not say. Here is a short list, sir. It does not address the yawning and growing intergenerational equity gap between today's young generation who acquire a mortgage during their tertiary education, cannot buy a home because of the rapid escalation of the housing crisis, and are saddled with debt from day one in their careers. That is not an issue that faced the Minister for Small Things, Mr. Dunn, or many members of this House when they were acquiring their tertiary education, but it's sure as heck an issue for our young people today. And that, sir, is unfair, because we are asking them to pay the escalating superannuation and healthcare costs that is going to support the baby boom while taxing them more and more heavily. That is not fair. That is why a generation of them are leaving our shores. Sir, it does not promote access to tertiary education. By National's own numbers, sir, 25,000 young people have been excluded from tertiary education due to their last round of cuts. 25,000 young New Zealanders excluded from the tertiary education system by National's previous round of cuts. Sir, postgraduates are finding it almost impossible to survive in the tertiary education system because among those cuts, the current government has limited student loans to a cap of 5 years of education. But a PhD, sir, takes a Masters in 2 or an Honours in 3, that's 7, and people are struggling to get through, many giving up, many going to Australia. Export education has become the export of the educated. That is not a profit-making solution for New Zealand. So this bill obviously does nothing to reverse the Kiwi brain drain. 54,000 New Zealanders net outgoing migration in the last 12 months. We would have had 8.4% unemployment. The government has the worst economic management record in 51 years, sir, and that is what Bill English himself described as a safety valve. We're exporting our smartest young people as a, quote, safety valve to keep the unemployment numbers down and stop the government being embarrassed. This country is in decline. It is in decline. We are depopulating. We are losing hope. We are losing steam. We are losing identity. We are losing a vision for our future. And in the face of all of those problems, sir, what does this bill do? It does two tinkering little changes, unobjectionable though they may be, which should have occupied about 1 page of a proper bill on tertiary education, not take up the whole time of the House doing tinkering little changes which are frankly wasting Parliament's time. Not because they are wrong, but because they are so minuscule in the face of the challenges that this country has, that the government and the minister should be embarrassed to take up the time of the House. And sir, the changes in this bill do not even make the student loan scheme sustainable, sir. They save, as I said earlier, $7.5 million at best over 5 years, a little over $1 million a year. In the face of a $2,670 million debt mountain, with over half of all overdue borrowers overseas. Ironically, 53,400 at last count equals, sir, almost exactly to 1 year of the brain drain. There's 400 million of overseas overdue debt, 409 to be precise. This bill solves at best 7 of that over 5 years. It is inadequate, it is desolate, it is devoid of ideas, it is devoid of vision. It is, as one commentator said of the Prime Minister, like a map with no compass. A map with no compass. It does not serve this House well, sir, that we take a whole session of House time to debate what is essentially a bill of 2 substantive clauses. Is this government so run out of ideas that this is the best they can do for tertiary education or revenue? Is this the best they can come up with? I would warrant, sir, that officials, if given the encouragement, would come up with way more than this. There are so many gaps in the tax system, it looks more like a Swiss cheese than a revenue. Like a Swiss cheese, it's got so many holes, or a motorway system because you could drive buses through it. And in the face of that, we get tinkering, nitpicking little bills like this, or like last week's debacle of the car park tax and the iPad tax, which no sooner went to the public domain than the government flip-flopped and rolled over because they were patently absurd, sir. And it's not just that they are bad. It's not just that they're inadequate. It's that this country is going to rack and ruin because of the government's inaction, sir. We want vision. We want a future. We don't need just this petty, although relatively unobjectionable, little bill.
I call Alfred Naro.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I take a short call on behalf